Hey, good morning, Juanita. How are you? Good afternoon.
Hello,
Sorry,
good afternoon, Mark. Good afternoon. Good to be here again.
It is great, and it just makes it all that more special and professional with our little introduction.
With our jazzy little jingle at the front.
But it's all jingling at the front. That's it. Absolutely. So today I thought we'd talk about the 12 will killers, and this is just a list I came up some time ago, and you've had a look at these, and I hope people can see those over on well, actually they're pretty much in the middle of the screen, but we'll just go through those one by one today.
We've got lots to talk about today. Lots to talk about.
We may only get halfway through and have to extend this into to next week as well. But basically, I just wanted to look at things when I put these together. I just want to look at things that trip people up, where people think they've got everything taken care of, and everything's fine. And I've talked before about that sort of pompous presumption where you just assume that your professional advisors have done the right thing and everything's taken care of. And as time goes on, some of these will killers become more apparent. So these are the 12 most obvious things that I've found that can really mess up a good will at the wrong time. So let's just go through these one by one. Do you want to kick off with
Sounds good.
With
Sure.
the first one,
Number one, inappropriate executors. So a lot of people ask, who should be my executor? And the executor of your will, for those who are unsure of the term, is the person who has the responsibility to collect your assets, identify your liabilities and pay them, and then carry out your wishes in the will and distribute your estate, as it says in the will. So who should it be? It can be it has to be an individual. It should be someone, in my opinion, that can handle the position. So a lot of people find it difficult because they don't have the practical ability or experience, and also remembering it's a really emotional time. So it's a responsibility that some people feel a little bit overwhelmed with, understandably. So the appropriate executor is one that you feel comfortable with, first and foremost, that you can trust, that has the ability to handle the job emotionally and logistically. But there's no right or wrong. It's an answer for every individual person.
Okay.
I thought you were about to jump in there.
No. We're both.
I can keep going. Before. Yeah. Sure.
Well, you could keep going all day.
I could. So, a lot of people put in their spouse. A lot of people put in their children or their trusted advisor, like their accountant or their lawyer. There's no right or wrong. As to how many, very good question. You can put up to 4. You can put more than 4, but the first 4 would be on the probate. We're getting a little bit complicated there, but it's not recommended to put that many in because logistically it can become quite difficult. So, typically we might see a spouse or children. When there's multiple children, the question is, who should it be? Sometimes we see perhaps the oldest child being put in as the executor. Sometimes we might see all 3 children put in as joint executors, and they must act jointly. They can't act as a majority. And that might be done sometimes because the person making the will doesn't want to offend anyone. So, you have 3 children. You don't want to put 2 noses out of joint, so you put all 3 in. It's just important to know then that all 3 must act jointly, and all 3 must sign forms as necessary, etc. So, is it logistically possible if they're in different cities? So these are all the things that, we need to talk through to help someone pick who the right executor is.
Yeah, no, you've raised really good points there, all of those. So just again, the will killer number 1 is inappropriate executors. And I've just subtitled that with who and how many. So I've got a little different bent, I guess, on that. In regard to who, just taking it from a personal point of view, Juanita, I've always said that you want to have someone who has a human connection with the family that's left behind. So someone who's compassionate, someone who's got a heart and understands the family dynamics, the children's needs, and what assuming what parent would have wanted for those kids in
Mm.
regard to pastoral care, education needs, and all those sorts of things. So
Mm.
I think it's always important that one of the executors is actually human in regard to, if I can use that, in regard
It's always
to
an advantage, yes.
compassionate, and
Yeah.
and the second one is, and I always think there should be more than one, is have someone who's very smart with money, and it's a bit like good cop, bad cop. In other words, someone who, if Johnny turns up and says, Auntie Frida, I want a new Ferrari, and Auntie Frida's not going to say no to him, well, you've got someone else there who's the bad cop who can stand up and say, no, you can't have the Ferrari, Junior. You've got to you've got to work for a bit longer yet. So I always think there should be, I always encourage people to, before they go to you, to look at least two people and have a reserve, have someone as a reserve, and certainly in regard to children, I'm a great believer in it's either it's either all in or it's none in. In other words, never. My advice, and you may have different examples, but my advice is that unless all the kids are going to be executors, and that can be with mum or dad, whoever's left behind, they're either all in or none of them. For goodness sake, don't ever put one child in, because that's where you're really going to create blues and squabbles where, the other children may feel that, why is that one in charge? And then all of a sudden, it's just opening. I'm not saying it's always going to happen, but I mean, you're just increasing the risk for family squabbles, aggravation, and grief. So
yes, and you would have seen that happen many a time. Yeah, so it's horses for courses, but there's certainly all the things that you need to consider. And you made a good point, Mark. You should always have a backup. So if one person predeceases or has lost capacity, you have a backup for them. And you don't have to trot off and do a new will, or even worse, have no executor named in your will.
Yeah, and I guess that's part of the reason why you need to review wills regularly too, and especially if you pick up people who are older than you. And a lot of times people do. They say, oh, we trust these people. They're older than us. They're wise and they have maturity and all that sort of stuff. But, if you don't look at your will for 10 years and all of a sudden one of them's either died or they're getting to a stage where they probably don't want that responsibility either. They're at an age where they don't need that responsibility if you die. It's certainly part of a good review process to sit down and have a look every time you review your will. Think about who your executors are and think about the logic behind that. There's no question that most times, I sit down with people and we review the wills. 9 times out of 10, they either they're not friends with those people anymore, or they've moved off to a different place, or it's just not appropriate anymore.
Yeah, that's right. Or your children might have obviously grown older since you did your last will, and you feel that they have the competence and ability to act as executor now, where previously they might not have, or might have been underage.
Yep. Okay, so that's the first one. So it looks like we're going to spread this over 2 weeks.
We're 10 minutes in. We've only got up to number 1.
We haven't finished 1 yet, and we're nearly at 10 minutes. Okay, number 2, asset protection. Will your estate be protected from failed marriages, bankruptcy, and so on? And look, we've probably talked about this in previous sessions, but it's certainly worth touching on this again. Asset protection, testamentary trusts, and so on. And Juanita, I'll hand over to you here. What are the reasons you'd want to include that? And just before I hand over, the point here being, if you don't have asset protection, I mean your estate's at the mercy of failed marriages, ex-sons-in-laws, daughters-in-laws. If the kids get into trouble financially, the estate goes out the window and so on. So, what are your reasons here? Thanks.
Yeah, we certainly have. We've spoken about this in a few of our live streams before, but the fundamental issue here is you might have the best of intentions and leave your estate in your will to specific individuals in their name. What might happen if they receive that directly in their name is they have no asset protection. So, for example, if they later on divorce, or even if they're in a de facto relationship and separate after a period of time, there might be a property settlement and that inheritance becomes part of the pool. If they're in a risky business, perhaps, and they're exposed to insolvency or bankruptcy, that asset's in their name, that therefore gets lost to the trustee in bankruptcy. If a beneficiary has poor management skills, and that may just be they're bad with money. It may be they have an addiction, an alcohol or a gambling problem. That money goes straight to them in their name, and off it goes then due to those particular issues. And another example is if you leave your inheritance to your child, for example. No doubt he or she is probably going to leave that to their spouse on their death. And if they have an accident and pass away young, then all of a sudden that inheritance may go sideways into a blended family situation instead of down through your bloodline. So these are all the things that can occur without the appropriate asset protection in your will, which is resolved by putting in place testamentary trusts, which we've spoken about, and having that right structure in your wills to make sure that your intentions are achieved down the track.
Look, absolutely. And the reason we've listed these are the 12 will killers, which means that if you don't pay attention to these 12 things and others, obviously, but these are the most obvious ones, what your intentions are and what actually happens can be absolutely miles apart. And number two, probably more than anything else, asset protection around your assets can end up costing your family millions of dollars. I mean, a lot of people we talk with have estates that are significant size. And I mean, if you thought now that giving away a quarter of your estate to a son-in-law or a daughter-in-law is effectively their next husband or the next wife of your daughter-in-law,
or
someone
the
you've never
in
met.
Bankruptcy.
That's right. I don't think you'd be happy lying in your grave knowing that all your money was going to places that you never would have wanted that to go. So these are important things to pay attention to. Okay, the third one is, do you want to cover this one off, Juanita? Black sheep.
Sure.
There's always there's not always, but a lot of times there's a black sheep in the family somewhere. And a black sheep doesn't mean that something wrong with them. It could be that all the rest of you are crazy and they're the sane one.
That's right. So we'll often see that family situation where there is the proverbial black sheep, and you may need advice as to how you deal with that black sheep or how you implement what your wishes are. I think the thing for this step 3, what's needed, or number 3, is what's needed is good advice, because it's not something to be embarrassed about. It's not uncommon that there is a black sheep, but you need to get the correct advice in that situation to deal with the situation that's in front of you and to best lay out your estate plans. So I don't know how much more I can say about it, Mark. I think it's, again, horses for courses, horses for courses, but what is needed is the appropriate advice in your circumstances as to how to deal with what your wishes are from your heart.
Yeah, not that there's anything wrong with black sheep either, by the way. But,
no, not at all.
But I mean, let's be serious about this. What this really refers to is it's not just someone who's at odds with the rest of the family. It could be someone who has an alcohol problem, a gambling problem, just has a money spending problem. Someone who's just really bad with money and needs help in regard to, when you think it through, if you passed away and you've left a whole lot of money to a child or to a spouse even. I mean, I've had cases where one spouse is concerned that if he or she die, that the remaining spouse will just blow it all on shoes and clothes and parties. So nothing. I'm trying not to say girls and boys here, but you know where I'm coming from. But I mean, there's a lot of cases where you really need to, to be sure that instead of giving someone a whole wad of cash, you create a trust fund effectively for that person, so that, for example, if they've got a gambling, alcohol addiction, spending addiction, that someone is drip feeding or protecting that money for the child, so at least they've got a roof over their head and an income.
That's right. And in very blunt terms, it's if you have a beneficiary that has one of those issues, they're good people with those issues that need to be addressed, or it could just be someone that you just don't want to leave your estate to for personal reasons. And how do you deal with that and try to minimize the risk of having your will contested?
Yeah, and look, that does raise a point too, which you're talking about here, is that sometimes children are estranged from their parents, and so you might have two kids that are getting on fabulously with their parents, and a third one for whatever reason, and so on. There's an estrangement.
Yep.
There could be step parents involved, whatever.
Yep.
It could be a stepchild, whatever, and they're estranged from the rest of the family. So. Yeah, you've just got to take advice from guys like you, obviously, Juanita, in regard to how do you set that up so that there's not going to be a contested will and a squabble and a bun fight, or all the other words we use at the end of the day. Okay. The fourth one is, will the right money go to the right people at the right time? And this is a little bit of a follow-on from the previous one, but your thoughts here?
Yeah, it is a follow-on. Probably what I would add in that respect is what does at the right time mean? So you are able to stipulate in your will at what age you might wish your beneficiary to receive money. So most people would think that the legal age of 18 is not appropriate for a child to or a young adult to come into very large inheritance. We see there's no right or wrong, but we'll often see 25, 30, that sort of age group, age limit being the right time, with or without mentoring also perhaps to take their inheritance. I have seen some nastier limits up to 40 or so, which might be a bit harsh, Mark, but it's about having that discussion. What needs, who has what needs, and when is it appropriate that they manage their inheritance, and what help do they need doing that?
Look, absolutely. And I mean, here too, you're looking at a situation where you might have some kids that are of mature age, and you might have some kids, I know families, one we're dealing with at the moment, two of the kids are grown up and they're out working, and the third child is still at boarding school. So, and so, you don't want to give them a whole wad of cash straight away while they're still at boarding school. And I've got to say, the age for giving, and I won't use the word entitlement, but giving control of more control of a benefit out of an estate seems to be going out rather than coming in. I mean, years ago, people would say, at 18 they'll be fine, and at 21 they'll be fine, and then it was 25, 30, and even now, I mean, we do have clients that 30, 35 is kind of like, and whilst you may think I'm joking about this, I mean, parents look at it and say, at that stage they've had their practice marriage, they've got all, they've gone on all their overseas trips, done all their dumb stuff, by the time, because kids now are getting married later, they're having children later, and so on, and so I guess it's how do you put some level of protection around it so that it doesn't all just get wasted, and there's still an incentive for the child, young adult, to go out there and learn a trade, learn a business, have their own incentive in life to move along before you give them too much. But I mean, every case is different, so you've really just got to have the conversation.
It is, and what comes to mind here is that most people say, I know that what I was like when I was 18, and they're not getting it at 18. So that's what we often hear. So 18 is usually not the right time.
No, 21's probably definitely still not the right time. But everyone is different, and you've got to have the freedom to have that conversation, and people will have their reasons. But know that there has to be a choice in regard to this, so that you need to think about, for your own family, you know your children better than we do, so you've got to take all those sort of options into an account. Now, number 5. Do you want to read this one out? I hate to
number
read
5. 5 will killer is fair, not equal estate distribution. We have touched on this before. The concept that fair does not necessarily mean equal, so an equal split between everyone. A discussion needs to be had, first of all, as we've spoken about before, what's in your heart, but there may be specific examples where, as you just said, you might have a minor child that needs additional funds to get through school, or you might have
absolutely
a child that has particular medical needs, perhaps, that might need addressing. You might have
needs, whatever. Yep.
You might have a child that's worked in the family business or on the farm, or you know, and you want them to inherit those particular assets or have recognition for that. So these are all different examples where fair does not necessarily mean an equal split. And we're not saying that an equal split isn't fair, but it doesn't always mean that. It doesn't mean the same thing.
Sure. And look, for example, I mean, a new client I was speaking to this week, they've got 4 children. I mean, it was a really typical conversation I had with these people this week. They've got 4 kids. They've got one family business. The oldest son, and it's not sexist, it's just practical. The oldest son's been working in the business for 15 years. The other kids, by their own choice, have gone off and you know, you've got an electrician, a carpenter, and the daughter's gone off and she's doing something else as well. And they don't have any expectation or belief or want to go back onto the family farm, the family business. And yet the son, I mean, it's just in his blood. He wants it, he loves it, and all that sort of stuff. Now, these people don't have enough money off farm to create equality, even if they wanted to. So there's always a few issues here, and this is often the case. You know, to have the child, you know, one child take over the business and run it as a going concern. There's usually not enough other assets to create equality anyway. But the other thing is, well, a few other issues, but I mean, another one is usually the child taking over the farm gets the debt, and he gets the droughts, and he gets all the bad stuff. So even in a lot of times, if you ask the kids, and you know, there's 3 kids I'm talking to after this, one after the other, in regard to something similar to this, is that, you know, most kids would take the certainty of saying, well, okay, we'll take the house in town because we know we can always sell that, and that's worth this much money, as against the unknown and having to work something for the next 30 years and put up with all the droughts and you know, the fluctuations of the rural industry anyway.
Yeah. And another very good example of that, which just jumped to mind, is that sometimes people gift money or property to their children during their lifetime. So if one child has received such, you know, gifts before their parents' death, but not the other, then perhaps that needs some rectification at the time of death or in the will, if that's what the intention is. Sure.
Look, absolutely. And once again, there's no right and there's no wrong answer here. But I'm going to say that when you've got one child that's been working in the business and helped build the value of the business up over a certain number of years, and the others haven't been involved, I mean, the truth is to give them an equal share of an estate would actually be an insult to them for all the hard work they've done, because 9 times out of 10 they take that much of a salary in return for the fact that, you know, one day, Johnny, this will all be yours. So, you know, you need it to be unequal to make up for the fact that they probably worked there for the smell of an oily rag for many, many years. So
that's right.
But anyway, look, it's just one of those things, because a lot of parents do feel pressure that they need to make things equal. And I guess all we're saying here is there's a million logical reasons why you need to be fair, not necessarily equal.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry.
It probably leads on to 6.
I know you've got more to say.
No, that probably leads on to 6 quite nicely. The 6th will killer on our list is lack of family awareness and consensus, because you know, flowing on from those discussions we've just had, it can cause angst or confusion after people's death if they don't understand why someone has you know, left their estate plan as it is. So when there is family awareness, people understand what the intention is or how that estate plan has been set in place, then things can roll out in a better way, I guess, than otherwise.
Yeah, look, the biggest issue in I mean, I'm running webinars, as you know, with Leanne at the moment in regard to how to stop the family squabbles after you've gone. And I mean, one of the main things in that is making sure, and I mean, let's say talking to these people yesterday, the biggest issue that I could see that was important for them, as it is for most people, more than the dollars and cents and everything else, is they want the kids to all still get together at Christmas after they're gone as mates, not squabbling and pecking over the carcass, so to speak, when they're gone and arguing over money. So family awareness and consensus is really important. And the only way you do that is by having conversations. And as I'll say, as I've said many times before, you can't fix these problems from within the family. So mum and dad sitting down with the kids and having a conversation about what their plans are, might make them feel good, but it's not actually going to help the long-term success of their estate and their succession plans, because what happens is, all through their life, mum and dad have made the rules, the choices, the decisions, and it's very hard for kids to sit there and start an argument with their mum and dad, especially when they're talking about how they're going to gift them something, how they're going to distribute their estate, and the kids are sitting there hopefully feeling grateful for the fact that they're going to, something will come their way when mum and dad pass on, and that's the plan, that's the succession plan and the estate plan. So it's very hard for a child to stand up and say, well, that sucks, I want this and I want that, because one, it's disrespectful to the parents. One, it's you being an entitled brat if you do that, and so it's very hard for kids to have the arguments with their parents, and that's why what I do, for example, is meet with the parents, find out what their intentions and heartfelt intentions are, and then I go and speak to all the kids individually, one by one, to understand what their thoughts, their dreams and aspirations are, so that we can create some consensus between the family. Then you can get all the family together, and I guess that's my role and skill, is to then get the family together and say, okay, without breaking everyone's confidence, I can say, okay, if we do this, then everyone's going to be happy, and on you go with life. So, but it's all about, it really is all about the conversation, and I'm sure you've seen plenty of times, Juanita, where families don't talk about this sort of stuff, and it just turns to custard.
It does. It does. Absolutely. Very technical term there, Mark. Turns to custard.
Turns to custard, yes.
It does, and is more likely to turn into dispute and litigation after death, rather than having a smooth process through the estate administration.
And it's just tragic. We just see it so many times where, and it's all because people, generally the parents, the grandparents, just don't know how to start the conversation, and it's understandable why that's the case. But because they don't start the conversation, you've got the next generation thinking, well, do I stay here? Do I go and do something else? I mean, what's the point? And if mum and dad aren't having that conversation with the kids, all of a sudden the children that are working out there start to get resentment, and they're getting angry, and it's just it's a disaster. It's a recipe for disaster, and communication is just the key to bring all these things together. So anything else you'd like to say on that one?
I couldn't agree more.
Very well said. Okay, well, look, we started today talking about the 12 will killers. We've timed it perfectly. We're at
halfway through.
We're at the end of number 6. We're halfway through, so we'll come back next week and finish off the other 6 will killers.
There's some crackers in the next 6, so I can't wait.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. So if you thought there was some value in today, just make sure you come along next week. But as I said right at the top of this, is that fundamentally what we're looking at here are what are the things that, you're sitting there, you've got your will in the top drawer, and you're kind of going, Mark, I've done all this stuff. Juanita, we've, this is great, but we've taken care of all this stuff. I'm just going to tell you, in all our years of experience, these are the 12 things that are more likely to come up and bite you on the proverbial backside when you're gone, and everyone else is sitting there saying, holy mackerel, why didn't we think about this stuff? While everyone was around and we could do this. And so I hope today's been valuable. Look forward to seeing you next week. Thanks again, Juanita, and we'll finish off with the 12 will killers next week. So thanks everybody for joining, and catch up next week.
Thanks, Mark.
Bye.